The aircraft rose into the dark sky with a steady calm hum. Soft lights filled the cabin and people relaxed into their seats. Among them sat a young boy named Noah, calm and quiet for his age. He traveled with two men who stayed close without drawing attention. They watched every movement around him with trained patience. To most passengers, Noah looked like any other child on a night flight. A few rows behind them sat a man named Mark, restless and annoyed. He tapped his fingers and sighed loudly as if the world owed him comfort. His eyes moved across the cabin, searching for something to blame. When he noticed Noah sitting calmly, his expression changed. The respect shown to the boy stirred anger instead of curiosity. Mark leaned back, shaking his head as his thoughts turned bitter. Noah stood when one attendant quietly guided him toward the aisle. He followed politely, holding his hands together and looking ahead. As he passed, Mark spoke loud enough for others to hear. His voice carried mockery and cruel pride mixed together. Nearby passengers shifted, sensing tension growing in the air. Noah slowed, confused by the sharp tone aimed at him. The attendant stepped forward with calm authority, asking for respect. Mark responded with laughter and a careless wave of his hand. He leaned into the aisle, his face tight with misplaced confidence. In one sudden movement, he lashed out toward the child. The cabin froze as Noah stumbled back in shock. Breaths were held and fear spread through silent rows. The attendants reacted instantly, placing themselves between them. One knelt beside Noah, speaking softly to steady his shaking hands. The other stood firm, facing Mark with controlled strength. Across the cabin, several men rose at the same time. Their movements were calm, precise, and protective. Passengers sensed that something serious had just awakened. These men positioned themselves quietly around Noah. Their eyes never left Mark, who now looked uncertain. One spoke into a small device hidden from view. Another stood close enough to block any sudden move. Their presence changed the air from chaos to control. Whispers moved through the cabin like a low current. The captain's voice came through, steady and firm. He announced an unexpected situation and asked for calm. The plane slowly shifted direction, turning away from its path. Seat belts clicked as passengers realized the flight was changing course. Mark looked around, finally understanding the weight of his action. Fear replaced arrogance as the truth closed in on him. Noah was guided back to his seat, surrounded by silent protection. He did not cry, but his eyes showed deep confusion. He had not known that his name carried power beyond imagination. Outside the plane, stars watched as the aircraft turned through the sky. This flight was no longer ordinary for anyone on board. It had become the beginning of a truth that could not be hidden. The aircraft continued its turn through the night sky as calm voices guided order. Passengers remained seated, though their minds raced with questions. The attendants moved with quiet purpose, checking on everyone nearby. Noah sat still, holding a small cushion while listening to soft reassurance. The men around him stayed alert, forming a silent shield. Their focus never drifted from the man who caused the shock. Mark sank back into his seat as confidence drained from his posture. He avoided eye contact as whispers circled him from every direction. The weight of attention pressed harder than any spoken word. He tried to speak, but found his voice unsteady and weak. Sweat formed along his brow as fear replaced earlier pride. He realized control had slipped far beyond his reach. One of the protective men leaned closer to Noah and spoke gently. He asked if the boy felt safe and needed anything at all. Noah nodded slowly, still trying to understand what had happened. He asked why the man was angry, and no one answered directly. The question hung heavy in the air without needing explanation. The men exchanged looks filled with quiet resolve. The attendants contacted the cockpit again, sharing calm, clear details. The captain acknowledged with a steady response and firm direction. The new destination was confirmed, and the crew prepared accordingly. Passengers were informed that safety came before schedule. Murmurs rose, but no one argued against the decision. Everyone sensed the seriousness of the moment. As the plane steadied on its new path, the men revealed small details. They spoke softly to the crew, sharing identification and purpose. The attendants listened with widened eyes and respectful nods. Understanding spread without announcement or spectacle. The cabin atmosphere shifted from shock to restrained awe. Phones were lowered as silence returned. Mark overheard fragments of whispered conversation nearby. Words like protection and protocol reached his ears. His breathing quickened as reality pressed in closer. He realized the boy was not just any traveler. The respect he had mocked now made terrible sense. Regret crept in, though it came far too late. Noah watched the stars through the small window beside him. He had flown many times, yet never like this. He felt older in that moment, though still just a child. The men beside him reminded him to breathe slowly. They told him he did nothing wrong and never had. Their voices carried warmth and certainty. The plane began its descent toward the new airport. Lights outside shimmered like scattered jewels below. Crew members prepared the cabin with practiced calm. Passengers followed instructions without resistance. Every movement felt deliberate and watched. Anticipation settled deep in every chest. Mark stared straight ahead, gripping the armrest tightly. He knew consequences waited beyond the landing. The power he once believed he held had vanished completely. The cabin no longer felt like a place of comfort. It felt like a courtroom without walls. And judgment was already written in silence. Noah rested his head back as the aircraft lowered smoothly. He trusted the people around him without fully knowing why. What awaited on the ground remained unclear to him. But he sensed that truth was moving fast. The night held its breath as wheels neared the runway. And the story was only growing heavier from here. The aircraft touched down smoothly as lights from the runway filled the windows. A quiet tension moved through the cabin as the engines slowed. Passengers remained seated, waiting for what would happen next. Crew members stood ready with calm faces and steady voices. The protective men stayed close to Noah, forming a gentle circle. No one spoke loudly, and the silence carried heavy meaning. Outside the aircraft, several officials waited near the gate. Their posture was alert yet professional and controlled. The captain spoke briefly with them before the doors opened. Instructions were shared carefully without raising alarm. The priority was safety, order, and clarity for everyone involved. The night air felt cooler as the cabin doors finally opened. Officials entered calmly and spoke first with the crew. They listened closely, nodding as details were shared. Their eyes then moved toward Noah with visible care. One knelt slightly to meet his eye level and spoke gently. Noah answered quietly, still trying to process the moment. Reassurance followed, and his shoulders slowly relaxed. The officials then turned their attention toward Mark. He was asked to stand and follow simple instructions. His movements were stiff and his face pale with worry. Nearby passengers watched without speaking or recording. There was no shouting, no force, only firm direction. The weight of consequence filled the space around him. As Mark walked down the aisle, he avoided every gaze. He understood now that the moment could not be undone. The pride that once fueled his actions felt distant and small. He realized how quickly words and choices could collapse a life. Each step toward the exit felt heavier than the last. The cabin seemed to breathe once he was gone. Noah remained seated as the officials spoke again with the men beside him. Quiet confirmations were exchanged with practiced efficiency. The attendants listened carefully, understanding more with each word. A sense of respect filled the air without any announcement. Passengers began to grasp that the child was deeply protected. Not because of fear, but because of responsibility. One official explained softly that Noah's family would be informed. That care and privacy were the priority above everything else. Noah nodded, though he did not fully understand the scale. He asked if he had done something wrong. The answer came quickly and clearly with warmth. He was told that kindness never causes trouble. Passengers were eventually allowed to exit in calm order. Many glanced toward Noah with new awareness. Some offered gentle smiles, others silent respect. No one approached him or asked questions. The mood had shifted from curiosity to reflection. Everyone carried the moment in their own way. Noah was guided through a private corridor away from noise. The men stayed close, speaking softly to keep him calm. They explained that sometimes adults forget how to behave, and that protection exists to keep people safe. Noah listened, absorbing lessons meant far beyond his age. His trust in them deepened with every step. Outside the terminal, the night waited quietly. Vehicles stood ready with doors open and engines warm. Noah paused and looked back once toward the plane. He felt that something important had happened, not just to him but to many others. The journey was far from over and truth was still unfolding. The vehicles moved quietly away from the airport under soft street lights. Noah sat in the back seat watching the city pass by in silence. The men around him stayed calm and steady, offering quiet presence. He felt tired, but his mind remained awake with questions. No one rushed him to speak or explain. The night felt long and thoughtful. Inside another vehicle, Mark sat alone, surrounded by silence. His hands rested on his knees, shaking slightly. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. Each memory felt heavier than the last. The anger that once felt powerful now seemed empty. Regret settled deep without comfort. News of the diverted flight began spreading quietly. Not through loud headlines but careful official channels. Details were shared with accuracy and restraint. Those responsible focused on truth, not drama. Every step was taken with respect for privacy. The situation carried weight beyond a single moment. Noah arrived at a calm, secure place designed for rest. Warm lights and quiet rooms welcomed him gently. He was offered food and water and a chance to sleep. Though tired, he asked to speak with his father. The men nodded, knowing the call mattered. Connection was arranged without delay. On the screen appeared a calm, strong face filled with concern. Noah's father listened without interruption or visible anger. He asked simple questions and gave simple reassurance. He reminded his son that dignity comes from calm strength. Noah felt comforted by the steady voice. The call ended with a promise to meet soon. Elsewhere, Mark faced long hours of reflection. He sat waiting while professionals spoke with measured tone. No insults were thrown, no voices raised. Only clear questions and recorded answers. Each word forced him to face his own choices. Silence followed every response. Time moved slowly for everyone involved. Passengers from the flight returned to their routines. Yet many carried the memory with quiet reflection. Some questioned their own reactions and silence. Others felt gratitude for unseen protection. The moment stayed alive in private thought. Noah rested at last, drifting into light sleep. The events replayed softly behind his closed eyes. But fear did not take root. He felt protected not because of power, but because people chose to stand between harm and innocence. That lesson stayed with him. Morning light began to touch the city. Decisions were being prepared with care and balance. Responsibility was weighed against learning and accountability. No one rushed the process. Justice moved slowly, but with intention. The outcome would speak louder than anger. As Noah woke, he felt calmer than before. He sensed that something important had shifted. Not just for himself but for those who witnessed it. The world had revealed both its flaws and its protectors. And the final chapter of this journey was near. One that would leave a lasting mark on many lives. Morning fully arrived and light filled the quiet rooms around Noah. He sat up slowly, feeling rested but thoughtful. The night before felt distant yet important. The men nearby greeted him with gentle smiles. Breakfast was offered and conversation stayed calm. No pressure was placed on him to speak. Soon a familiar presence entered the room. Noah's father arrived with calm strength and open arms. There was no rush, only quiet reassurance. They sat together, speaking softly about the flight. The father listened more than he spoke. His steady presence brought deep comfort. He explained that standing up for others matters. That calm strength often speaks louder than anger. Noah asked why some people act with hate. The answer was simple and honest without blame. Fear grows when understanding is missing. Learning was the path forward. Later officials shared that the situation was resolved with care. Actions were taken thoughtfully and responsibly. The focus remained on safety and accountability. Noah's privacy was protected fully. His family expressed gratitude for the crew and passengers. Respect guided every final decision. Mark faced the outcome of his own actions quietly. There was no crowd and no spectacle. Only time, reflection, and consequence. He listened as expectations were explained clearly. The moment became a lesson he could not escape. Change would require effort, not excuses. Back at the airport, staff reviewed the event together. Training and awareness were strengthened quietly. Every role was examined with honesty. The goal was prevention, understanding, and dignity. Small improvements were treated as meaningful. The system learned without pride. Passengers from the flight carried the story forward. Some shared it with friends and family. Others kept it as a private reminder. Many spoke about the calm courage they witnessed. The image of protection stayed strong. A moment became a message. Noah returned home surrounded by familiar sounds. Life slowly returned to routine. School friends greeted him without knowing details. He smiled, played, and learned like any child. Yet something inside him had grown. A deeper sense of self-worth. At night he looked out at the sky again. Planes passed silently overhead. He thought about how quickly moments can change lives. He remembered the people who stood for him. Gratitude settled where fear could have lived. Hope took root quietly. His father watched him from the doorway. Proud not of status but of resilience. The lesson was not about power. It was about choosing kindness and courage. The world had tested them briefly, and they had answered with calm strength. The story of that flight faded from public view, but its impact lived on in quiet ways. In choices made and lessons remembered. In people who decided to speak sooner. In systems that learned to protect better. In a child who knew his worth. The journey that began in the air ended on the ground. Yet its meaning traveled far beyond distance. It reminded many that dignity must be guarded. That silence can be broken by steady resolve. And that even one moment can shape tomorrow. The sky remained wide and full of possibility.